the local recording going. Okay.
Why do you want a tablet that has free data virtually
Okay, I can get.
All right, now watch.
No. Skip ad.
What's that? That is a top
Okay, I can definitely hear
tablet that
that.
has virtually All right, now watch.
All right.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. So your volume's down?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, okay. Okay, sounds good now. All right. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Torn Book Club. I am Saruman, your host, and our guest today via Skype is Charlene Templeman, who you may know in the chat as taekotemple. Say hi.
Hi.
So she's here with us today, and as you've been seeing on Facebook and Twitter, we're taking a little bit of a break from books this week to discuss the tragic loss earlier of the great Robin Williams, who passed away on Monday from suicide. And I wanted to talk a bit about what he has meant to us and what he's meant to me. He's one of these people who I feel has touched everybody in some way. For me personally, I remember first being exposed to him, as most people of my generation, by watching Mork and Mindy, and that sort of set the tone for how I related to Robin Williams, because he was playing an alien, and he seemed so alien and so out of this world that idea just stuck with me like throughout my entire life, that there was something very otherworldly about Robin Williams. And he was a great entertainer. He was fantastic working with his crowd, with the audiences when he was doing his stand-up specials, and he was so fast. He was so fast with his wit. He could go out into the audience, find somebody sitting there, they're wearing an interesting piece of clothing, and he would knock out like 5 or 6 really hilarious jokes right off the top of his head, right there in front of everybody. And it was a marvel to see a brain like that work. And you could always tell, like, there was a level of energy in all of his performances that never really seemed attainable by any other human being. And it was always fascinating to watch that. And he was a tremendous actor. I've seen so many of his movies, and so many of them brought me to tears. And the day that they announced his passing, I went home after work and watched one of my favorites, Hook.
I love Hook.
Yeah, it's absolutely one of my favorite movies. And actually, my friends who run a sword fighting class out here in LA, it's the Academy of Theatrical Arts. They were stunt coordinators on Hook, and they got to work with Robin Williams and Dustin Hoffman and Donnie Bosco and all those people. And so when it was announced, they posted a lot of pictures of them on set with Robin Williams, and it was very heartbreaking. He, as far as it relates to Tolkien, and I know that Cliff and Justin brought this up on Torn Tuesday, and I always noticed it myself way back before a Lord of the Rings movie was even announced, back in the early days of the internet, when it was all Usenet and Unix systems, and everybody had to sign on to forums, and people were discussing who they would like to see cast in a hypothetical, at the time, Lord of the Rings movie. And there were many names that came through, and there were certain names that always stuck with certain characters. But one name that always seemed to be like the only name that could ever, or the only person who could ever play Tom Bombadil, was Robin Williams. Now,
Been great.
and it would have been fantastic. And of course, Tom Bombadil never made it into the movies. Um, but I remember discussing it with my friends. I remember discussing it on the internet with strangers on Usenet, and we were all in agreement that Robin Williams is the only man who could play Tom Bombadil. Mm-hmm. And sometimes now, like one of my friends jokes with me because there will be this eventual, once the Hobbit movies are done, maybe a couple years down the line, there will be this huge box set of the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit all together in one big ultimate collection with new extra stuff. And my friend would always joke, this time in this ultimate edition they're going to add in the Tom Bombadil scene with Robin Williams. And unfortunately now that's never going to happen. And I feel as though his warmth and his energy is unmatched and was taken from us far too soon.
Yeah. I want to add too that, you contacted me to, speak because of my background in psychology, but he was also a local to my area.
That's right. Yeah, he was.
I went to school very close to the house that he lived in.
Mm-hmm.
And that was also very close to the house in Mrs. Doubtfire.
Oh, wow.
A lot of people, there was actually news for a while that the people who actually own that house were starting to get upset because tourists would come and take pictures in front of their house, and it used to drive them crazy.
Yeah. I would imagine.
Yeah, but the thing that I've been really noticing with a lot of the posts people have been making on Facebook is a lot of local San Francisco Bay Area people have shared stories of meeting him in places and how kind and warm and generous with his laughter that he was.
Yeah.
I think I read one story. A family had just had a funeral and they had gone to a local donut shop, and Robin Williams was there eating a donut, and he saw them and he came over to them and he really cheered them up. And for somebody who has depression, to recognize sorrow in others and go up to them and try to bring them a little bit of hope back, I think is a really just such a moving thing to do.
Yeah, it really is. And like that was the thing, and somebody mentioned this on Facebook, sort of paraphrasing a line from the Lord of the Rings movies. I give hope to others, I keep none for myself.
Yeah.
And they paraphrase that for Robin Williams, I give joy to others, but I keep none for myself.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's really that's the hard thing with depression. Mm-hmm. Is that most people we actually have had some members of our own local community. I won't mention them by name. Mm-hmm. who took their own life.
Yeah.
And it was very much like the same kind of situation where this person was very outgoing, very very friendly, very much a part of the community at large. Mm-hmm. And then to hear this just came out of the blue and shocked so many people.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what happens. There, like, I found that while there are warning signs, in some cases with some people, you don't see them.
Yeah. Well, I think part of that is, sometimes, and so often we hear these stories about these really kind, wonderful people who have committed suicide. Mm-hmm. And part of it is that they are so giving that they forget to take care of themselves.
Yeah. And
it's very difficult. One of the things that was constantly reiterated to me in grad school studying counseling is you have to think of it like you're on an airplane.
Mm,
And, you know, when those gas masks come down, they always say, put yours on first before you help the person next to you.
yeah.
And the reality is, you know, you have to take care of yourself. You know, if you're giving of yourself and you don't take care of yourself, you're going to burn out,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah. Rovandir makes a good point, which is sometimes you also don't know what the signs are, and uh, they think that people should be more educated in knowing the signs of depression, and that's absolutely true. And we're going to talk a little bit about that
Yes.
later on in the show. That's why I brought you on, because you do have a background in psychology and can shed some light on some of these things, like, and even like what depression actually is, as opposed to somebody just having a bad day.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of stuff that people don't understand, and what it creates is people who are having a bad day saying that they're just so depressed, while another person who is suffering from true depression
Hmm.
is constantly being told by people, listen, you're just having a bad day, just get over it.
Yeah.
And
I really want to point out what youth streamer just 581555 just said.
yeah.
They said, I recently heard this great piece where it's more useful to say someone died from suicide rather than committed suicide because it sounds like it was a crime. I think that is a very, very important point,
That is a great point.
and it
Yes.
feeds back into how we talk about mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of time when we talk about somebody who's mentally ill, we'll say they're schizophrenic, they're bipolar. We
Yeah.
don't say they have schizophrenia, they have bipolar disorder.
Right.
When it comes to physical medical things, we talk about, you know, somebody has cancer. We need to
Mm-hmm.
change how we language around um, mental health, because when you identify somebody as being their mental health disorder, you're totally cutting them off from being listened to
Yeah.
as a whole person.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. And I like to. I'm going to get very personal here and tell my own story or relate my own experience. Now, I personally have never been diagnosed with clinical depression, but I have definitely had very prolonged depressive periods in my life. To the point where I am shunning the world. I don't want to leave my house. I've contemplated taking my own life,
Mm-hmm.
um, and for me, the way I always try to describe it to people is this. One of the things that people always talk about is like, this is something you should just get over. This is just a temporary thing. Tomorrow will be
Words
better. Like
to say.
lots of little
Words.
platitudes like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
and what they don't seem to understand is that all this stuff that's happening in your brain feels like it's happening from outside. Like like the way I would describe it is, you get up in the morning. Try to imagine if you get up in the morning and there is somebody there in the room with you telling you, you are terrible, why are you even bothering to get up? And then
Mm-hmm.
throughout the entire day, that person is with you, constantly saying terrible things to you and telling you, you are just awful, everything you do is wrong, everything you say is wrong, nobody likes you, nobody believes you.
Yeah.
And like, if it were a real person, like, your friends would come rushing to your aid and beating the hell out of that person.
Of course.
But in this situation, like, you go to your friends and you try to tell them, listen, I'm just like, cuz like, you want help. Like,
Yeah.
initially you do want help. And so you go to your friends and you say, listen, I'm having a really tough day. I need a helping hand. I need somebody to be there for me. And they never see this tormentor who is with you, and therefore they think this is not a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's where a lot of the distrust of other people comes in, and that's why people with depression feel so alone, and they
Yeah.
feel so isolated and cut off, and it becomes so overwhelming. Like, imagine like having to battle a dragon or a demon or a beast every day, all day, for your entire life.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
uh, like it becomes, do you fight another day or do you just give up?
Mm-hmm.
And it's very hard, and that's why and it's so internalized, and
Yeah.
it's very difficult to pull yourself out of that on your own. Like, you really do need help.
Yeah. Give me a moment. My commercials just came on.
Oh, okay.
Like to be touched
Okay.
there.
Oh, lovely.
Whoa, what was that?
Pet the rainbow. Taste the rainbow.
Skittles commercial. Yeah, great. Okay.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, even if you have the
I am
Land of the
so
free
sorry.
and home of the mouth-watering
okay,
ballpark
we'll get through
Franks.
this in a minute.
I
Made with 100%
yeah.
Angus beef and just a dash of democracy.
Let me see.
Ballpark Franks, so American, you can taste it.
Yeah, you know I'm in America when my
Introducing
commercials
America's
are about
greatest
America.
invention and
Yeah.
Mark's finest
Okay.
from Ballpark.
What is okay.
Ustream. Even when you
Here we
mute
go.
the
Here we
stream,
go.
the ads still are blasting.
It's done.
Okay.
All right. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, stream. We love you. Okay.
Yeah, well, we got to make our money somehow.
Yes, it's true. Doesn't pay for itself. Um,
and I hope you all enjoy that, everybody. We got to hear
a Skittles
Temple's
commercial
commercials.
and something for hot dogs. Very American.
American hot dogs, yes.
So, I want to address what you've talked about because, sometimes, we're talking about depression, but we're talking about somebody who died, so we're also talking about grief.
Yeah.
And sometimes people don't know the difference.
Right.
Grief is directly related to a situation that has happened, whereas depression is an internal thing. There are physical changes and mental changes. So when it comes to depression, it's not just, I'm upset and I'm having a hard time. It's that your brain is actually not producing enough of certain neurochemicals. You might be overproducing certain hormones.
Right.
So there is a very physical component to this, a very medical component to this.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's part of it. So it's not, you can't just snap yourself out of it when your body is not working,
Right.
the way it's supposed to, and your brain is not working the way it's supposed to. It's not just thought, it's physical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the big thing. Now, I mean, what I had was not a medical issue. Like, I never had any medication prescribed to me.
Yeah.
Mostly because my therapist wanted to see what progress we could make on therapy alone.
Yeah.
And we actually made
It's
a lot.
smart.
We made a lot of progress.
Yes.
And
On average, at least in the United States, we over-prescribe medication for depression.
mm-hmm.
A lot of people who get prescribed medication for depression are not depressed enough to need it.
Yeah.
And studies have shown, I've read a study, I can't remember off the top of my head, but
Okay.
said that the least effective treatment between counseling and medication is to do only medication. And then in between that is counseling by itself. And then the most effective is medication and counseling. But if somebody doesn't need medication, you don't give it to them.
Yeah.
And, it's quite scary to think about how many people are being given medication that might not need it.
Right. And that's and I was lucky in that way that I didn't need medication, and my therapist had the forethought to say, let's try therapy without medication and see what happens.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah. And
I want to point out somebody said it. I'm really trying to pay attention to the chat because
Yeah, so am I. But yeah, I wanted you to finish that thought. But
yeah,
yeah, I saw one.
the fire staffer, I think.
Yeah, fire
I
stuffer. Yeah,
fought depression for years, on and off medication. I discovered I felt worse on the medication.
yeah,
A lot of people have problems with the medication. They say it makes them very fuzzy.
hmm
They feel like they aren't themselves,
yeah,
and a lot of times sometimes doctors will prescribe higher levels of medication than you really need.
yeah. And Gracie Martina is saying sometimes the medication just makes it worse.
Yes,
And
because, and I want to point this out too,
yeah. Go ahead.
with medication, if you are not taking it properly, if you just stop suddenly, oftentimes with people who are suffering with depression, that is when they commit suicide.
hmm
Not everybody who is depressed will do that, but
Right.
it is more likely to happen when there's an issue with medication.
Yeah.
So,
And and
keep
that's
that.
that's something that my best friend had to deal with.
Yeah.
She has anxiety.
Yes.
I'm not going to mention her by name, of
Okay.
course. Um, but for many years, she was working with her psychiatrist to try to find the right balance of medication that would make her feel okay.
Yeah.
And there was about a year or so of like this very hard trial and error of like upping dosages, lowering dosages, changing to this drug, changing to that drug, until finally, like she did find that balance.
Mm-hmm.
But it took a really long time, and it was very hard for her to go through. And as her friend, it was very hard for me to see her going through this because there was only so much I could do.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Can I just say something about the conversation I'm seeing going on in chat?
yeah.
Impressed how wonderfully intelligent everybody here is.
Oh yeah.
I
Oh,
mean,
absolutely. Like
like what Rovan here said, that about exercising helping people that are depressed, it is extremely useful
mhm,
because what's going on with depression, one of the neurochemicals that is major in depression is serotonin.
right.
And when you do repetitive motion, especially like exercising,
hmm
it brings your serotonin levels up. People
Yeah.
with depression, their brain doesn't process the serotonin properly. They could be producing enough and it's not getting absorbed, or they are just producing less.
Right.
And so serotonin helps you to feel happy. It helps you to feel vibrant. It helps you to feel awake. And it also, serotonin is what turns into melatonin at night so we can sleep.
Right.
So if you don't have enough serotonin, you also don't have enough melatonin. So I
hmm
often, when I was working as a counselor, I would often tell people, please exercise. It is so good for you. So many people are stuck indoors because of the way how people's jobs are, and
Yeah.
we're stuck in cubicles. Please get at least a little bit of exercise, even 10-15 minutes. It helps because it
hmm
clears your head, gets you out in the sun, which also helps increase serotonin.
hmm
And it's a great stress relief that is inexpensive.
It really is, and that's something that I try to do a lot of because like you said, my job is sitting at a desk for 8 to 10 hours a day.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm doing lots of intense like deadline oriented stuff,
Yeah.
which sort of adds to the stress of it all. But my friend and I, like, we actually work together now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, every hour or so, we'll just get up. Doesn't matter how under pressure we are to finish a project. We'll get up and just go walk around the studio for like 10 minutes, and then come back.
Yeah.
And
Difference.
it really does make a difference. And I see like a lot of people like, let me just say first of all that everybody in the chat right now, you're giving some wonderful advice and you're making some fantastic observations,
Yeah.
and it's great to see that we've cultivated such an intelligent audience.
Yes.
uh, But I see Fire Stever is talking about meditating and using yoga and Tai Chi, and that's helped a lot.
Yeah.
Um, and I I've done some meditation before. I can't say whether or not it's been successful. It certainly hasn't been a hindrance. I just haven't stuck with it very long.
Yeah.
Um,
What I would say is, if anybody's struggling with feelings of depression and need to help themselves, it's good to find not just one but a few things that help you feel better.
yeah.
Meditating can be a very useful thing. I just did yoga yesterday. I'm all in pain from it, but yeah, yoga is great because if you have a good yoga instructor, they're going to be very reaffirming. So you're getting a lot of reaffirming information being given to you by your instructor, as well as doing something physical, which helps
hmm
you.
Yeah.
Um, Although I do have to add, with all these wonderful suggestions that are very on point, if somebody is majorly clinically depressed, they need more than just that.
Yeah. Yeah. They definitely
And,
do. Um, and you recommended a number of books to me that I wanted to share with the rest of the audience.
yes,
So let's go through some of those. The first one is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. Um, and it's a semi autobiographical book about her own struggles with depression.
yes,
And of course, Sylvia Plath very famously took her own life.
yes.
Um, but it's a interesting exploration of depression and all that, and it also what's also interesting about it is it takes place in a different time period than where we are now,
Yeah.
and so the sense of isolation is far greater.
hmm
Um,
Yeah, we have social interactions online, and
mhm.
that makes things a lot easier, even if
Yeah,
you're stuck at home and you have agoraphobia or social anxiety, you still are able to connect with people in a way that, we weren't back then.
yeah, and because I mean, also back then, depression, anxiety, most clinical mental disorders were they had a very strong social stigma attached to them,
Yes. Oh,
which just increases the isolation.
yeah, and I can tell you too, that, you know, mental institutions were pretty horrible. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
men could marry women who were
really?
perfectly sane and then drop them off at a mental institution. They'd marry them for their money and they could drop them off at a mental institution. These women would be perfectly sane. They'd be put in these places with other people who are very scary,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
you know that would be considered socially okay.
Mm-hmm.
Which is something to say about the progress we've made in the
Yeah.
States.
Like I always say, thank God we live in the future.
Yeah. Hopefully, the real future will be even better than this future.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Um, so another book that you recommended, which I haven't read, is On Death and Dying by Elizabeth Kubler Ross.
Yes.
Um, and you were talking to me a little bit earlier about how she's highly respected
Yes.
in.
Yes. The Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, her books are so easy to find. She is not just highly respected in pop culture, she is highly respected, or in pop psychology, she is highly respected by people who work in the field of psychology. She's pretty much the preeminent writer on grief and death and dying issues.
Hmm.
So,
Now, Gracie Martina also mentions online you're able to get in contact with people in a way that's good for you sometimes, especially if you have social anxiety and don't like actually meeting up with people.
and actually, speaking of online too, one
Hmm.
resource I want to tell people that's very valuable is that many social media sites
Hmm.
actually have ways you can report if a friend of yours on that social media site may be behaving or writing about potentially committing suicide. So, Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, MySpace. There's another one that I'm not remembering right now, but they all have ways that you can report if you think somebody is going to harm themselves. So, just so you know, there are one of the wonderful things about, being online too, is that you can actually help people in a very immediate way if they seem to be,
Yeah. And and like that actually kind of leads into another book that you recommended. Before we get to that, Rovandir has a really nice statement. It helped my social anxiety when I started to meet up in a group for lonely young people in my town, and a month later I dared to start tabletop roleplay. And that's huge, because tabletop role-playing games are social by nature.
Yeah. I think one of the most important things is to make steps for yourself. I mean, like, the movie, What About Bob? He talks about
exactly, baby steps.
Which is hilarious in that movie, but it's really true. Like, I struggled with severe shyness as a child, very severe shyness.
Oh, me too,
and,
for sure.
What I started to do to help me get over it was get into acting and theater. And it genuinely helped me a lot. I still have struggles in certain situations, but you do little things at one time, and it'll help you. Get through further. And I've got commercials again.
Oh no!
It won't let me turn off the volume when the commercials come on.
It's like at this point, it's like if you lower the volume on that, you have to lower the volume on everything.
Yeah, I don't want to do that because then you can't hear anything.
Yeah.
So it's an IKEA commercial. Enjoy the IKEA commercial.
Yes, and
I happen to be quite fond of IKEA. I know people hate it, but I like IKEA.
I like IKEA. They make good stuff and at good prices. There, another IKEA commercial right there for you.
Okay, wait. Here's another one.
Okay.
Put A1 on pork.
For A1 steak sauce.
They also like
yeah.
Okay. I can't really say too much good about that.
Tigers like. Put A1 on whatever you want. A1 for almost everything. Almost.
But it's called steak sauce. How is it for almost everything?
Yeah, I don't know. I want to point out, too, at this point, that humor is one of the best coping mechanisms you can have.
Yes.
And, at a time like this where people are thinking about grief and depression, the ability to laugh, the ability to find something funny is another one of those things that is not just emotionally better for you, it's physically better for you. It actually causes you to produce positive neurochemicals in your brain.
Yeah. And
so it changes how your brain is functioning. So please laugh as much as you can.
Absolutely. Like, I used to do a stand-up comedy myself, and that helped a lot. Of course, the behind-the-scenes part of stand-up comedy is very bleak.
Yeah.
But when you're up on stage, it's one of the biggest highs you'll ever experience.
Yeah.
When you're able to get a whole room of strangers laughing with you.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to, one of the Ustreamers pointed out that online sites such as Facebook be more damaging than not.
Yeah.
It definitely depends on how you use them. It depends on how your ability is to, dismiss things that aren't important. That's one of the things that I've had to learn from being online is how to kind of build a tough shell and decide what to invest myself in and what not to. I've been known to, unfriend people who have such like vitriol in political discussion or religious discussion just because I just don't want to deal with it every day. And, I also make a point to, on any of my social media sites, I make everything as private as I possibly can.
Yeah.
I don't add just anybody. I make sure that people, I have to review who I'm adding.
Right. So, yeah, and
Yeah.
And I'm kind of the same way, and it is very hard in social media. There's a metaphor that's gone around a while, like
Mm.
to sort of describe how people tend to view everybody else on social media,
Yeah.
and it's basically like watching everybody else's highlight reel while you're stuck with your behind the scenes video.
Yeah.
So everybody, like, because people will pick and choose what they want to post on social media, and usually, like, unless they're just very angry, bitter people, they tend to focus on the positives in their life,
Yeah.
and they like to share that. And
Yeah.
so what you see is just tons and tons of people whose lives are great, and
Yeah.
meanwhile you're sitting there like, oh, I'm just having one bad day after another. Everybody's doing so much better than me, and that can definitely add to depression.
Yeah. And I purposefully shut down my Twitter account. I don't have a Twitter account anymore
Mm-hmm.
because it just amazed me how horribly cruel and messed up people can be
They
in
can be, yeah.
140 characters or less.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like I
Well,
don't want to invest my time in that. You
yeah,
know?
and like I'm loath to bring up the the incident that happened with Zelda Williams, Robin Williams's daughter.
Yeah,
Um,
that was just, it shocks me that people think that's okay.
yeah,
And I always tell people when you
and
write something on the internet, you need to think about how you would feel if somebody told that to you before you post it.
yeah, and the other thing to bear in mind is that while you're because what ultimately happened with her boiled down to just two people doing this,
Yeah.
as opposed to the thousands upon thousands of people who were sending warm wishes and and their prayers and their thoughts and their kind words to her. But those two people were so cruel that they canceled all of that out. And that's the power of negativity on the internet.
One horrible interaction, one cruel word can really hurt a person.
Yeah. Um, and it got to the point that she had to leave Twitter. She was that upset by it.
Yeah. And
Um,
rightly so. I
yeah.
mean, the reality is we have feelings and we can't just run away and hide from them. And
Yeah.
one thing I learned, because I've shared before here that my father died when I was a very small child.
Mm-hmm.
And I held a lot of feelings then, a lot of my feelings about his loss inside. And that was so much worse than, as I grew older, I learned to find the time to let myself cry.
Mm-hmm.
And letting those feelings out in a safe space is probably one of the most positive things you can do for yourself.
Yeah.
We all have so many feelings, and hiding from them and stuffing them down inside is not going to make them go away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're having there's a lot of like really good conversations going on in the chat.
Oh,
Uh, let's see. They were talking about going out into nature
yeah,
to help with your depression,
yeah,
and that's a big help. And it's actually lucky out here in LA that we have Griffith Park,
mm-hmm,
which is just this humongous mountainous wooded area that you can just hike in, and it's in the middle of the city, and yet when you're there you sort of feel like you're miles away from it,
yeah,
and it really does help.
yeah. Plus, if I may say, anybody who lives near the ocean, if you are feeling down, go to the beach. The
Yes.
endorphins in the air from the ocean water is very good for you, and it will bring your mood up.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a very beneficial thing to do.
It is definitely.
Just fresh air. I mean, when
Yeah.
we're stuck inside, we are breathing air that's often recycled. It's not
Mm-hmm.
fresh. It's not clean. And those of us who are city people, you
Mm-hmm.
know, when we go outside, the air's not so clean either.
Yeah, like,
Um,
I mean, like right now I'm sitting in my apartment and all my windows are closed and I've got the AC going because it's like 100 degrees outside.
Yeah.
and and then like once the show is over, if I step outside, it's just going to be beating hot and also smog filled. So
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah, I went to college in LA for a semester and I just deal with it. I had such bad acne from all the toxins and everything.
Yeah, yeah. And Ravandier makes a good point that the sound of waves are also very calming.
You know, it's not hard to find either like, you know, CDs of, nature sounds, or
Hmm.
I have a thing I got from Sharper Image before it closed where it has 20 different kinds of sounds that you can play as white noise. And my personal favorite is the thunderstorm setting. I just find that so cozy and soothing, but it has ocean, it has
Yeah.
Northwoods, it has like all these different things, including traffic.
Hmm.
For those of
Yeah.
us who live in city areas and find the sounds of traffic soothing because we're used to it.
Yeah, it's like white noise, really.
Yeah, yeah,
So, Ustreamer, let me just go back here. Ustreamer 368101 said, "Don't know if you've covered this already, but just talking to someone who will listen is a huge depression reliever."
yeah,
And we did talk about it a little bit, but I would like to bring it
yeah.
up again because that is a very important thing. That's a very important subject, and it relates to this one other book that you recommended to me. Um, what to do when someone you love is depressed.
Yes.
Um, uh,
As hard as it can be
mhm.
when somebody is suffering from depression, it can be really challenging to the people who love that person.
Yeah,
And it takes it takes a lot of self-reflection to be able to spend time with somebody depressed and really be there for them.
it.
Now,
Yeah,
me personally, I have always been somebody that people go to talk to about their problems. It's
hmm,
just part of my personality. Maybe it's just because I'm more likely to listen than talk.
okay,
Um, but it's kind of why I went to studying psychology. And, one thing I've really learned is that oftentimes the people who are hurting most are attracted most to the people who listen the most, because so often
yeah,
they don't feel listened to and they
yeah,
don't feel valued.
yeah,
And that's why it's counseling can be really helpful. You
yeah,
don't have to stay in counseling forever. Any counselor who tries to keep you in counseling forever is not doing their job. The point of
yeah,
counseling is to help people build the skills they need so they can function in the world on their own without the
hmm,
counselor.
yeah, and I do have to say, like, just having somebody in your life who will listen to you and will stand by you can make all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
When dealing with depression, and being that person can help somebody um, with depression in ways that you may not even realize are happening. Um,
Yeah.
because again, I'll talk about my experience because I was very much I was an angry person um, along with being depressed, and when people would try to tell me, listen, you need to get into therapy, listen, I just want to help you, I would push them away. Like
Hmm.
I would say, listen, you don't understand, you can't possibly understand, and therapy can't help me, I'm beyond help, like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And and it was my best friend, the same one, who who really stood by me and said, listen, you need to go to therapy. I have a therapist. I can recommend her to you. She will make an appointment for you. Just sit down, talk to her once. That's all I ask. And finally I did.
Yeah.
And that began the process. And I have to say that this therapist, this counselor was very, very good. And like you said, she um it got to a point where I was doing so well that she said, "Listen, we don't need to see each other anymore. You're doing fine on your own,"
Yeah.
and that's the big thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I want to say, not every counselor is right for every person.
hmm,
So if you are looking for a counselor and you just don't feel right, don't feel bad about finding someone else, because you know what? It doesn't matter on the counselor side. What matters is that you get the right help you need. And the reality is, most people who study counseling have been in counseling,
Mm-hmm.
and many of them have also struggled. Like, I can't tell you how many people in my class in grad school have had issues with addiction, issues with depression, issues with post-traumatic stress,
Mm-hmm.
and having been abused. I mean, just about everybody in class had a story. So
Yeah.
when you go to talk to a counselor, you're not talking to somebody who doesn't understand, because oftentimes many of them have lived through it as well.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times when people um, specialize in certain areas of counseling, it's because they've been through it. So you go to a counselor, and they've you know for depression, they've probably had some experience with that on a personal level. You go to somebody because you've been abused, they've probably had some experience with that as well. So
Right.
and the reality is, counselors aren't supposed to reveal much about themselves to their clients
Right.
unless it is therapeutically useful. So you'll never really know, what their story is and what their background is,
Mm-hmm.
personal level.
Right.
But the reality is, they might understand a lot better than you think.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I have to say about my counselor, was that, like, she understood where I was coming from, and she also understood my way of thinking, and
Hmm.
was able to use that to sort of retrain my own thought process
Yeah,
in a more
that's what
positive
a
way.
counselor should do.
Um, and that sort of leads to another book, The Mindful Way Through Depression.
Hmm.
Um, and this one is more about, oh, you streamer 368101 has to leave. Bye.
I'm
Bye.
here.
Thank you for coming. Um, so this book is more about how to work your way through depression, um, with without medication, but more using your own mind and your own thought processes.
Yeah.
And it is it it's something that can be very beneficial to a lot of people. I mean, there are some people who will have it so bad that stuff like this will not work. But
Yeah.
I think for most people who have some form of depression, just being able to think your way through it
Yeah.
helps a lot.
It
And
is possible to retrain the brain,
mm-hmm.
and depending on how, uh-oh, commercials are starting again.
Uh oh.
No, no, just when I was getting to an important point.
Okay.
Um,
We'll wait.
if I can
In a
talk
world that
over this
revolves around your
commercial.
kids,
We'll try.
Um,
selects
let's see. Oh, it's a hot dog commercial.
Another
Again.
hot dog
It's so
commercial!
hot. I don't
Yay!
eat hot dogs. All right. So let me think for a moment. What was I going to say? Yeah, depending
I
on
was talking
how,
about retraining your brain.
yeah, depending on,
Meet the
oh,
McTaggarts.
great, the
They like to put
steak
A1
sauce
on
commercial
pork, but
again.
not beans.
Um,
They also like to sit on the same side of the booth. You don't have to
Mhm.
like everything the McTaggarts like. Put A1 on whatever you
Okay.
want. A1
Right.
for almost everything.
Thank you.
Almost.
You're done. All right.
Okay.
So, depending on, like, somebody who has schizophrenia and has voices in their head, it might not be as easy to deal with as, somebody who's more along the mood disorder spectrum. But it is possible to, change your internal thought patterns. And sometimes it takes doing things like posting up affirmations on your walls and places you can see every day, so that you're constantly reading and seeing those images that are positive.
Yeah, and like what worked for me was I'm I'm very much a logical type of thinker,
Yeah.
and so a lot of what I was doing in my depressive states was I was using logic to sort of explain why I was so terrible,
Yeah.
or create like this sort of seemingly logical reinforcement for all the negative talk that was happening in my head, and rightly so, it drove lots of people crazy.
Yeah.
because I was very good at it, and I was constantly shutting down every argument somebody would have.
Yeah.
And
People with depression are very good at explaining why they are right to be depressed.
hmm
And
yeah,
it's you know, it's just, you
yeah,
know, part of it.
and so what my counselor did was, she saw that I was doing that, and then started like asking me just very basic, simple questions that
Mhm.
were also just like rock solid arguments against what I was saying. Like,
Yeah.
you have a good job, you have your health, you have good friends, you have a friend who loved you so much that she practically dragged you here kicking and screaming.
Hmm.
So tell me again why your life is so terrible.
Yeah.
And and like when and I felt kind of like backed into a corner a little bit, like I didn't really have a good answer for that.
Hmm.
But rather than lashing out, like, I started thinking, she's right. I don't have a good answer for that. Maybe I do need to like really take a closer look at this. And she was reinforcing that, and I was reinforcing that, and it got to the point where I was doing it myself.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
a lot of times, like, it does take like it's very hard to sort of take that step back
Yeah.
and look at yourself.
It is. It definitely is. I want to address something that's going on in chat again,
Yeah.
talking about hugs and touch.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
scientifically, it has been proven that touch is very important for the psychological development of people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people who grow up without positive, friendly, affectionate touch are more likely to have a lot of struggles in life than people who are exposed to that kind of thing. Now, here's something because just to give you background, in my family, my mom was from a big family of 10. My grandfather was an alcoholic, and he was physically, emotionally, and sexually abusive to my mom and my mom's brothers and sisters.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so if somebody is upset and they need a hug, you don't just give it to them. You ask them if they want it.
Yeah.
And that is something I've done working with kids too, because my background in counseling has been specifically with traumatized and abused children and teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I always made a point with them, and also with just kids I know in general. You know, a lot of times adults will tell a child that they should hug somebody, and they kind of goad the kid on until they hug somebody. That is a horrible thing to do. We should never force kids to hug anybody. It's their body,
Yeah.
and they have a right to decide who they want to hug and who they don't.
Yeah.
So I think it's really extremely important whenever you want to hug somebody, you ask them, "Can I give you a hug?" If they say no, respect it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And never ever take it personally, because you don't know what's happened with that person. You know, you don't know what their background is. You don't know if that'll trigger them somehow. You know, like my mom, I know that I can't walk up behind her
Mm-hmm.
without making noise, or else it terrifies her.
Okay.
So yeah, so I want to say yes, hugs are so important. Positive physical contact is one of the kindest things you could do for somebody who's struggling, but never do it without permission.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very important point, and I'm a very physically affectionate person,
Yeah,
and
me too.
and
Hug people like there's no tomorrow.
oh yeah, oh no, I love I love hugging people, um, but you're right. Like, if somebody has been through something, or they're very upset, like, it's important to sort of just get that permission first.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, and Eruvandi has just joined the chat.
Hi,
Hello.
everybody. I'm sorry I don't have video on the chat, by the way. I was watching something online and it made me laugh, and I spit up water all over my keyboard, and so my laptop isn't quite completely working, but if it's broken because I laughed, then that's not such a bad thing.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. There are worse ways to destroy your computer, I guess.
yeah, yeah,
um, so so I'd like to talk a bit more about some of the other books that were recommended, and another one that I think you recommended was An Unquiet Mind by
yes,
Kay Jameson.
yes. I,
Um,
I'd love to speak very specifically about this because
yes.
this book is this is definitely one that I have very thoroughly read. Kay Redfield Jameson is one of the preeminent sc- uh, scholars in bipolar disorder. Now, so what bipolar disorder is, you go through periods of depression and periods of mania.
Mm-hmm.
And Kay Redfield Jameson is not only one of the preeminent pioneers of bipolar research, but she also has the illness herself.
Okay.
And one of the as much as the statistics are really sad in terms of people with depression committing suicide, it's even higher in people with bipolar disorder. Because what can happen is with somebody who's depressed, they may have suicidal ideation, but they don't have the physical or emotional energy to actually act on it. Whereas somebody with bipolar disorder, if they get to the end of a manic episode and they're entering into depression, that's a very sensitive time. And that is when, oftentimes, when somebody who's bipolar who has suicidal ideation, that is when they'll commit suicide.
Mm.
So, one of the things I was thinking about, and I do want to say too, An Unquiet Mind is not written in a totally academic way. Anybody can read it. It's very much an autobiography rather than an academic book.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
Good.
one of the things I've been
And Gracie Marcina is saying I'm going to check out some of these books you guys are mentioning.
yeah,
What I'll do after the show is done is I'll also post Amazon links to these books on the show's Facebook page and our Twitter,
yeah,
so you'll be able to find them, and they are relatively cheap. They're like I think most of them are about $5 to $7 on Amazon Kindle.
yeah. I think all of those books are available in paperback too.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
you'll be able to find cheap copies of them just
Yeah.
about anywhere.
So
And
I'm sorry I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I saw what you wrote.
What?
Oh, I still said, I wondered who was talking. Don't tell Temple.
Uh-oh. I stole.
I
You've been
got
found out.
So, yeah, sometimes part of the reason why I recommended books that are written by people with those disorders, with those mood disorders, is because you're going to get what it's like to be inside their head far more than a book that just tells you how to deal with
Yeah.
depression or deal with other mood disorders.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get an actual solid feel for what it feels like to be in that person's head.
Yeah.
And I I thought that was really important because just going back to Robin Williams again,
Mm-hmm.
people are talking about the fact that he had depression, and I don't know what his clinical diagnosis is for sure. People are throwing out that he was depressed. It's possible he could have been actually bipolar and
Yeah.
not just clinically depressed.
Well,
So we don't know the diagnosis.
well,
People
what
are
his wife was
depression.
his wife released a statement a couple days ago saying that he was in treatment for depression and anxiety,
Yeah. And
and also, and this is another big one, was that he was in the early stages of Parkinson's disease.
yes, and that's important to recognize too, because sometimes, when people develop an illness,
Mm-hmm.
uh, like the family that I was working with, the mom who has cancer, when she was first diagnosed, they diagnosed her an antidepressant as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times when you hear the news that you are sick, that you are not well, and it's a scary illness,
Mm-hmm.
you'll get depressed.
Yeah, and Parkinson's is a very scary disease.
It,
I had a family friend who went through that,
yeah.
who had it and eventually passed away.
Hmm.
And this person also had no family of his own, and so our family sort of took him in and helped to take care of him and helped to settle his affairs and all of his legal stuff
Hmm.
um, for when it was time for him to pass on.
Yeah.
But it's a very hard disease. It's like I the way I can best describe it is a very slow and painful death sentence
Yeah.
because there is no cure. There's only some palliative treatments. And Michael J. Fox has it as well. And
Yeah.
what you don't see, like if you have been watching the Michael J. Fox show or you've been watching any of the um, PSAs that he does, and they're all very important. He is strong beyond measure for doing it,
Yeah.
um, because when you have Parkinson's, you lose control of your body,
Yeah.
and to maintain that just long enough to do something for just a couple of hours, which is pretty much just a quick shoot for a PSA or some scenes for his show, that's about all you have, and it is exhausting.
Yeah.
And and it's a very difficult way to live.
Yeah.
Um, so, and I don't say this to say, well, now I understand, but it it's a very hard thing. It's very hard news to get, and it's also very difficult knowing that what you have now is not only going to affect you, it's going to affect the people you love.
Yeah. And I want to tell you guys something interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have a DSM-4 TR. They're
Okay.
DSM-5 now.
Mm-hmm.
So mine is slightly out of date. These books are huge. They're like doorstops. We used to call them the doorstop.
Okay.
But pretty much it's the diagnostic book that we use to help us determine what kind of illness a person has and how to diagnose it.
Okay. Is
Um,
that big thud I just heard?
yeah. Uh, yeah, it's about like it's probably about the same length as if you bought the Lord of the Rings with all three books together in one book.
Oh wow.
So I mean, it's that big and it's that heavy and it's pretty like I would not recommend anybody getting a copy unless they were in psychology.
Yeah.
But I want to say too that the way how we diagnose depression, there's actually a completely separate diagnosis for depression brought on by illness versus depression just as depression.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, like the woman I worked for who I mentioned had cancer and she was put on antidepressants, that would be a situation where you diagnose depression brought on by a medical condition,
Mm-hmm.
by a general medical condition.
Right.
So I just thought that was really interesting, and
That is that
you know,
that is very interesting, and we don't know whether or not the Robin Williams's depression was brought on by the Parkinson's diagnosis, or if it was something that he had been dealing with for a very long time.
from what it sounds like to me, he's been struggling with it for a long time, and
Yeah.
I think about a few years ago, Owen Wilson was struggling with depression,
Mm-hmm.
and it just amazes me how many really funny people and comedians have these depressive episodes since they bring so much joy to us. And now I have another commercial.
Okay. Well, while we're doing the commercial bit here, Rovandier recommended a book, The Alchemist,
Summer goes by fast.
Yes.
which I've never heard of, but I'm definitely going to look that up. It sounds very interesting.
I've heard of it. I haven't read it, but I will say that there's so many good books out there,
Mm-hmm.
You up
and
to? Just playing
I have a
pie,
cheese
the
commercial.
cheddar. Can I play?
It's actually kind of cute, but
One person
annoying.
game.
Yeah.
There are a lot of great books.
I like-
Tillamook medium cheddar. Taste better because it's made better.
Thank you. Um,
Okay.
I do want to say that books are a great resource, and also even though psychology has historically been anti-religion because Freud was anti-religion,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's more common now that therapists are trying to include spirituality and religion into counseling
And
because
yeah,
that's a resource.
yeah, it is a good resource, and I sort of feel like that it is a worthwhile thing because there are people who do get a very positive feeling from spirituality, and
Yeah.
it's not something that you should just dismiss.
No, not at all. Because anything that helps you feel connected and
Mm-hmm.
helps you feel safe, those are good resources for you.
Yeah.
And I was raised Buddhist, so
Mm-hmm.
although my mom's family is Catholic,
Mm-hmm.
she converted to Buddhism before I was born, and that's how my parents met. They were both Buddhists. So sometimes, like some of the imagery in Catholicism, kind of creeps me out,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean I'm not going to devalue the benefit it gives somebody.
Right. Right.
As long as they find something positive and growth
Mm-hmm.
um,
Like, yeah.
enhancing,
Yeah.
that is a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's always been my philosophy towards any sort of religion or spirituality. If it helps you and it doesn't hurt anybody else, then you can do whatever you feel.
Yeah, yeah,
And those are my only two criteria for any sort of spirituality. Does it help me? Does it not hurt anybody else?
yeah, yeah.
And
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 most
and, and
major religions fall in that category.
most do, and most practitioners of religions fall into that category.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there are some few who do horrible things within their religions, and it's
Mm-hmm.
sad, and
Mm-hmm.
it gives religion a bad name.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know,
Yeah,
I,
and
I
it is very unfortunate. I was raised Jewish and still identify as Jewish,
yeah,
but I'm from the Reformed synagogue,
yeah.
which is sort of like it's like Jew light, pretty much. Like I will eat a bacon cheeseburger whenever I feel like it and not feel guilty about it. Well,
Yeah.
not religiously guilty about it.
You don't have to eat just the Hebrew national hot dogs. Since I've been getting so many hot dogs.
Yeah, exactly. Um,
Yeah.
so, but my rabbi growing up spoke a lot about just like very positive images about the world at large. Very, very wonderful, very positive philosophical sermons, and and it really did sort of help to form my own my own personal philosophies of life, and and I mean, my rabbi was he's such a good man that he actually came out of retirement to officiate my grandfather's funeral,
Mm-hmm.
which was astounding.
And yeah.
Um,
And if I may add just another Lord of the Rings connection,
yes,
the
please.
reason my mom read Lord of the Rings the first time is because she went to Catholic school and one of the nuns recommended it to her.
Okay.
So I have that nun who eventually left the service and was known as Rosie Taylor. I have Rosie Taylor to thank for introducing my family to Lord of the Rings.
Nice.
So,
Yeah,
so
and my stepfather is he's a very Catholic man,
hmm
but he's also somebody who will he when he came into our family, he knew that my brother and I were raised Jewish, and we like to keep to the traditions because that's what we were raised doing,
yeah,
and he embraced that, and he wanted to learn as much about it as he could, and he loves every minute. He loves Hanukkah every year,
hmm
and it's a it it was really nice to sort of see somebody from another religion embracing another religion just
yeah,
because like that's part of your life now.
yeah. I think just in general, we should always try to keep a bit of openness
Yeah.
about us, and being willing to, even if we don't understand something, just being willing to learn a little bit about it. It's actually good for your brain to constantly be learning new things. It
Yeah.
helps keep it elastic and strong and working.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I always like to take lessons in something or other, like a music lesson or dance or
Yeah.
read a lot. It's good for you.
Yeah, it is. It is, and like it is important to always keep your mind active, and it's important to, um, and one of the things I wanted to get back to is
Yes.
people like because I think a lot of us. I mean, there may be some in our audience who are dealing with depression. There, but I have a feeling that there are probably more who know somebody who is dealing with depression,
Yeah.
and how to handle that, or
Yes.
because it's a very frightening thing, and you're not entirely sure how to go about that. It like and it's sort of like, do you want to know all about it? Do you want to take that into your life?
Yeah.
Um, and the best thing I can say for anybody who might have a friend who is suffering from depression, um, is to go out of your way and tell that person, I believe what you're saying, and I am here for you, even if it's just coming over and we just watch TV for a couple of hours. I'm here
Yeah.
for you, and that can make all the difference in the world to somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to point out a couple of resources. I know you did an infographic for it.
Yeah.
This is for the U.S. only. There's a national suicide hotline.
Yes.
It's 1-800-273-8255.
Mm-hmm.
And
The website for it is suicidepreventionlifeline.org.
yes. And I wanted to point that out because there are some they have some great information on that website about how to signs that somebody you care about may have depression or may be suicidal.
Mm-hmm.
So it has like a list of risk factors. It does have some ways to support them, some suggestions. I also want to point out too that if you know somebody is planning to commit suicide, ask them what their plan is and try to make a deal with them so that they will put off committing suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And even though it sounds like, oh, come on, if somebody's planning on committing suicide, they're just going to do it. The reality is, if you make a deal with someone, sometimes it can keep them from stopping. You could say, okay, so you have a plan.
Mm-hmm.
So I want you to make a deal with me. I know you said you were planning to do this tomorrow. And people can and will tell you if they are planning to commit suicide.
Yeah.
Tell them, okay, I know you're planning to do this tomorrow. I would like to make a deal with you to wait 24 hours. And in that 24 hours, I want you to call me whenever you need help. I want you to call the National Suicide Hotline if you need help. And when that 24 hours is up, I definitely want you to call me so we can talk about this again. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes suicide is even though there's a plan, the motivation to commit suicide tends to be more circumstantial, and it tends to be in the moment.
Yeah.
So you can actually make a difference, by being there for them in that way. Just making sure you make a deal with them, and it's something that counselors do. And it's something that anybody can do.
Yeah, and Aravandi was making a good point here. My aunt has some problems with depression. She's getting help for it, though, and she knows how much I adore her, and we talk all the time, which makes us both happy.
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest things that you can do, is just just talk with somebody. And like you said, anybody can do it. I don't want to relate the entire story, but if you go to YouTube, if you look up James Doohan, who played Scotty on Star Trek, he has an absolutely heartbreaking story, or actually a very uplifting story, I should say, about a fan who came to him and said straight up at a convention, I just wanted to let you know that you are a big influence to me, but I've had a hard life and I will be taking my own life tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to break it down very, very succinctly, but James Doohan took this kid aside and said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to write me a letter every day about how your day went. Here is my address. And every day I will expect a letter from you, and if I don't get a letter, I'm going to call the authorities.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm going to call your home. I'm going to call your parents. I'm going to make sure you're okay.
Yeah.
And so it basically, like, and he did that. He wrote him a letter every day for a long time. And then eventually it did sort of fall by the wayside. And from what I understand, the way he tells the story, the kid came back to him at a convention many years later and said, I don't know if you remember, but I was that kid who you had write a letter to you every day. Mm-hmm. And now I have a good job, I have a good family, I have a good life, and it's thanks to you.
Yeah.
And Rovandir was also just relating a story here. Last year I helped a friend out of a depression as well as out of an abusive relationship, and I honestly had no idea about it before she confessed to me about it in December last year. It came as a huge surprise. That's tough.
You know, I do want to say, sometimes helping somebody, you don't have to do a huge thing to help somebody.
Yeah.
You know, it can be something very, very simple. And that small, tiny little thing can make the biggest difference. Just as one cruel person can ruin your day, one kind person can make your day.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
You know, I have to give you props for that, Rovandir, because so many people don't do anything. Mm-hmm. And I read an article recently about street harassment written by a woman who was in New York, and this guy told her, she was getting ready to go on the subway, and this guy told her to smile.
Yeah.
And she didn't. And he chased after her and started yelling at him, he started yelling at her, saying, why is it that fat black women never do what I want them to? And he starts just reaming her.
Wow.
And, you know, there's people all over the place, and she shouted, someone please call 911. Nobody called 911. People walked by. Some people laughed. Some people said, well, I'm not getting in the middle of a domestic dispute, not even knowing the circumstances. And finally, a group of young men came over, and they physically made a barrier between her and the man who was harassing her and scared him away.
Wow.
And, you know, and that's, you know, that's not a huge thing. When you're a group of people and you see one person on the side of the street is suffering, you know, just the numbers is enough to make a difference.
Yeah.
Go up and you support somebody.
Yeah. And Gracie Martinez is saying sometimes helping someone else can make you feel better about yourself, not just them.
Oh, heck yeah.
Absolutely.
It's gratifying. I mean, you know, there's in a way, there's no such thing as a truly selfless act, because when we do something kind for others, it does impact us in positive ways.
And it does make us, it definitely makes us feel better. And for some people, just doing something good for somebody else, they may be doing that simply so that they can feel good themselves. And someone may say, well, that's just a selfish motivation. But motivation doesn't really matter in this case because you're still doing something to help somebody.
Yeah, what matters is that you're helping somebody.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, counselors, you know, so many of us care very much about people. That's why we do our job, but we get paid.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, it would be hard to do the job if you weren't getting paid. The reason why I don't have my license right now is because it is so difficult in the state of California to find a paid counseling internship that, you know, you can survive on, or, you know, if you can find a paid internship whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, and by the time when I was doing my internships, it was around the time when the economy collapsed.
Right.
Well, not necessarily collapsed, but, you know.
Fell
commercial
down.
again.
Yeah.
But we have to take care of ourselves, and, you know, there's no shame in feeling good about doing something for other people.
No, there definitely isn't.
Rainbow. Taste the rainbow.
Skittles.
Thank you, Skittles. There's going to be another one.
Okay. Now I'm like curious.
I know, like it's becoming part of the humor of this.
Yeah.
And you know, I think it's important when we talk about such heavy subjects to make sure there's, you know,
we do need humor in a conversation like this.
It's the same Skittles commercial.
Wow. Okay.
Whoa.
Well, that's anticlimactic.
Yeah, darn it.
Pet the rainbow. Taste the rainbow.
Okay.
All right, I guess I will taste the rainbow. Yeah. I thought maybe it might be good to talk about the difference between our common usage of the word depression and what depression actually is.
Yes. Yes.
So, you know, when you have one bad day,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that is not depression.
Right.
What it actually is I'm looking at the criteria for a major depressive episode. So, I'm going to read these.
Okay.
So, 5 or more of the following symptoms have been present during the same 2-week period and represent a change from previous functioning. At least one of the symptoms is either a depressed mood or a loss of interest or pleasure. So, the symptoms are depressed mood most of the day, nearly every day, as indicated by either subjective report or observation made by others. In children and adolescents, it can be an irritable mood. Markedly diminished interest or pleasure in all or almost all activities most of the day, nearly every day. Significant weight loss when not dieting, or weight gain, or decrease or increase in appetite nearly every day. Insomnia or hypersomnia. So hypersomnia is sleeping too much, nearly every day. Psychomotor agitation or retardation nearly every day. So that's being physically agitated and looking stressed. Fatigue or loss of an energy nearly every day. Feelings of worthlessness or excessive or inappropriate guilt, which may be delusional, nearly every day. Not merely self-reproach or guilt about being sick. Diminished ability to think or concentrate or indecisiveness nearly every day. Or recurrent thoughts of death, not just fear of dying, recurrent suicidal ideation without a specific plan, or a suicide attempt or a specific plan for committing suicide. So that's just a depressive episode. To be fully diagnosed as somebody who is depressed, that has to be going on for a period of like 2 years.
Yeah.
So if you feel that way every day for 2 years, so it's like, imagine your worst day you've ever had and it being like that every day for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You know, there are people who say that when somebody commits suicide, they're being selfish.
And that I do not agree with at all.
Complete bullshit. When you feel that bad every day, I mean, you know, it's horrible.
It's
go through that.
Like, I mean, because I like what you described in those depressive periods, like that. I've definitely felt that, but I mean, they don't they rarely would last more than just like a week or so.
Yeah.
For
And
me
that,
anyway.
yeah, and
But to
that's pretty
but
normal.
yeah, but to have that happen day in day out for years, like
Yeah.
like just the sheer amount of hopelessness that you must feel, like of course you want to end it because it's so painful. And even and people would say like, well, they're not thinking about their families, they're not thinking about the ones they love, which is also not true, because part of this is also in your mind. You sort of create this idea that you are a burden to all of these people, and
Yeah.
that by taking your own life you are actually helping them.
Yeah.
And whether or not that's true is immaterial to the fact that you believe it's true.
Yeah.
Um,
Definitely.
and so to just like paint it with a broad brush, saying, well, they're just being selfish, is so short-sighted, and so it really shows more on the part of the person saying it, their unwillingness to understand.
Yes. Exactly. Exactly. And it's it's part of the whole stigma of mental health. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the reality is a mental health issue, it's a disease. It's a
Yeah.
disease like cancer, it's
Yeah.
a disease like diabetes,
Yeah.
it's a disease like multiple sclerosis.
Yeah.
The difference is that you can't see it on the outside.
Right.
People will look at you and they will not see, oh, this person has this disease, I should have compassion for them. You know,
And
given there are
we
some physical illnesses that also aren't obvious from the
Yeah,
outside.
but also
But
beyond that, like even if you are aware that this person has depression, has been diagnosed with it, there's still a level of it where some people will say, well, that's not that big a deal, and it's all in
yeah,
that person's head, and they should just get over it,
yeah, yeah,
which is again very short-sighted.
yeah. As much as we love the song from Frozen, Let It Go, you
Yeah.
can't always just tell somebody with depression that they should let it go.
No, you can't let that go. And okay, to be fair, the song in Frozen, she's not talking about that kind of letting
Yeah.
it go.
Of
She,
course.
she's letting go of a whole bunch of other things.
Well, I mean, some people can look at her experience and say that you know, she was in a sense abused. She was
Oh,
told that
very
something
much.
was
Yeah.
wrong with her.
Yeah.
And she was told that, she had to hide who she was.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a chance for her to finally release and be real.
Yeah, and that's sort of what the "Let It Go" in that song.
Yes.
That was my takeaway from it.
Yeah,
It's like
definitely.
letting go of all of that restraint.
Yes. Yes.
So we're coming up on the 90-minute mark.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have to bring this to a close. But I wanted to thank you, Temple Charlene,
Yes.
for being on the show and for lending some tremendous insight into this into a very important subject that most people don't know about or aren't willing to talk about.
Yeah.
And I want to thank everybody in the chat. There's far too many of you to name this time around who have been relating fantastic stories and giving great advice, and just it's one of the most intelligent chats I've seen in a very long time. You're all wonderful people, and I thank you all so much for being here and for participating in this I consider very important discussion. And most of all, I want to say thank you to Robin Williams
Yes.
for giving us so much joy for so many years, and for teaching us the value of life and of happiness. And his loss is sad, and it fills us all with grief.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to remember all of the joy that he brought us. He brought us in our lives,
Yeah.
and we can always return to that, and we can always just smile with him,
Yeah.
as I'm sure he's smiling with us.
One of the best ways we can remember him is by watching his movies.
Yeah.
You know, and we're very fortunate that we have that. You know, I noticed on Netflix they put more of his movies available on Instant View.
They did, yeah, and I'm really glad for that. I mean, there are some movies I can't watch, like that I won't be able to watch, like What Dreams May Come. It will destroy me emotionally.
That's an intense movie that you have to be, ready and able and willing to watch.
Yeah.
Sometimes in terms of grief, I think I've told everybody here before, but every year I watch between my dad's birthday and the day he died. It was about a week apart.
Mm-hmm.
I watched the Lord of the Rings films, and sometimes I tag What Dreams May Come on the end of that. You definitely have to be in the right headspace to watch that, though. It's a very beautiful movie, but it's intense.
It is. It's a very intense movie, and it is a beautiful movie. And there's so many wonderful films of his, so many wonderful stand up of his, where you can see that one of a kind energy that he would bring to his performance, and nobody before or since has had that level of energy. And I would recommend any one of them. An Evening with Robin Williams from '89. You can go all the way back to the '70s. You can go all the way up to the '90s, or even later than that. He was still doing stand up, and it was always brilliant, and it was always so full of energy, and so sharp, so sharp in his wit. And he will always be an inspiration, and he will be greatly missed.
Yes. Yeah. So. Before we end, I just want to bring this up since we talked about it before we when we were talking about this show.
Yeah.
So I told you guys the National Suicide Hotline, and I believe Josh said he would post.
Yeah, I'll post that up. I'll post all the books we've been discussing up on Facebook and Twitter.
There's also a Wikipedia page that has a very rudimentary international list of suicide hotlines.
Right, yeah.
And if you're in a country that is not listed on there, and you know that there is a suicide hotline, please add it. Because, hopefully, we want to, things like, resources like that, everybody should have easy access to. And I know we have people from other countries that aren't, just Americans who participate and watch this. So please, check out the Torn Facebook page, and Josh will be posting that.
Yeah, I will post all of this. I'm going to be doing a lot of posting today.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you all again so much for being a part of this. We may do another episode next week. We may skip next week, and then just go right to the end of the month to discuss what I haven't talked about at all this week. Our book of the month, All Creatures Great and Small.
Yes.
Which I found an absolutely delightful book.
Yeah.
So next week we may skip it and then just go 2 weeks from now to talk about All Creatures Great and Small. So again, Charlene, thank you so much for being on and for giving us so much wonderful insight. And I will see you all, if not next week, then the week after that. So thank you all again, and never stop reading.
Thank you.